Morning and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 TV station in the world, without a doubt, NTV Uganda. My name is Romeo Biseku and I come yet again with another pertinent conversation, largely focusing on the new proposed national ID. What would be the direct implications, the socio-economic implications of the national ID on our populace right here in Uganda? Government has set aside some 600 billion Uganda shillings for the mass rollout of the registration exercise set to start. That is in June of next year, 2023, and this shall end around August of 2024. So if you have lost your ID at some point, you need to go and get ready for the renewal phase. Only 200,000 if you need the express system where you can get that national ID within 2 days. And if you are just replacing, or if you're just getting a new ID, you'll have to part with some 50,000 Uganda shillings. So the issue is that so many of our Ugandans even do not have national IDs. A third of this population does not have access to these national IDs, meaning they can't run verifiably to a bank and actually obtain a loan. That's how hard it is. For some other people, health services has been a very, very big challenge. So health service delivery has been hampered by the national ID issue. So that's why in April 25th this year, the Initiative for Socio and Economic Rights, that is ISA, actually sued in conjunction with two other civil society organizations, actually sued, that is the National Identification and Registration Authority, NIRA, over this issue. They say that the High Court has to actually pronounce itself and declare the national ID system very discriminatory and exclusionary, because many of the people have been excluded, especially the older people, from accessing the socio assistance grants and empowerment benefits in that regard, simply because they do not have national IDs. So we do have a new way of the national ID that is being proposed, but we still have to interrogate the last batch that was introduced in 2014. Did it bear fruit in that regard? Was it that effective in that regard since 2014 up to now? If only 70% of our population has been registered since 2014, you understand? What would that mean when we actually start rolling out the new national ID? Is it going to take us another 14 to 10 years to register only maybe 20% of the population? And that would be the direct effect of this national ID on this population in that regard. So we do have a representative from the Initiative for Socio and Economic Rights, the program officer to be exact, and that is none other than Alex Brian Waibi Kiira. He is the program officer at this organization, which is actually suing NIRA in that regard over the national IDs. We also have a representative of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. We do have Benard Mujuni, the Commissioner Equity and Rights at the same ministry. Gentlemen, a very good morning. Thank you for joining me right here on NTV Uganda.
Thank you. Good morning.
Indeed.
Yes.
And indeed, Alex Brian has been doing some amazing work in that regard. Someone might be asking themselves a very pertinent question. Why sue NIRA in that regard? But it's not only NIRA that has fallen in hot soup over these issues. We also do have the Ministry of Health that was sued around 2021. Remember when the ministry said if you do not have a national ID, you can't access the vaccines? Yes, it was ISA that went to court. But before court could pronounce itself on that issue, yes, the government through the Ministry of Health actually retracted that directive of having a national ID as a prerequisite for you to get vaccinated. So in tandem, the idea here is if we actually put these issues to light, the central government could see reason to it that we need to actually put in place alternative sources of identification, not only the national ID. What happened to the workplace ID? Why is it that I can't use it to access a loan? The village ID and such issues. So meaning if you do not have any of those, especially the national ID, you can't access those life-saving development initiatives by the government, like even in Yoga, Youth Livelihood Fund, and so forth. So that's why we are here to interrogate that issue. Of course, Alex, thank you for joining us once again. Let's start with a brief genesis of where we came from as far as the national ID system. Give us a brief background of where we've come from as Uganda, as far as the national ID is concerned, since 2014.
All right. Thank you very much, Romeo.
Indeed.
And also to say very happy to be here
Indeed.
For this discussion. And to the listeners also, thanks for tuning in, because I think every time we put up such discussions, it's imperative that the people for whom we're trying to speak out for are also listening in.
Lest government would think we are being pushed by some outside forces.
Exactly, yeah. So we have to be relevant.
Government part of it.
Indeed.
So for the national ID system, dating back to 2014, the genesis really, and I'd like to quote, and maybe this will also give context on how the national ID system is put in place. We all do recall that when it was being rolled out, of course, questions such as what is it going to serve, you know, justifications for it had to be given. And we do know that back then, the person that was leading the charge for the system through the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the late General Aronda Nyakairima, then came out and pointed out one of the issues as to why the national ID would be important in our context, which in his words was national security. So we had issues around national security, but also, you know, ghost workers, that it would help weed these out. So from the start, you can tell that the national ID per se did not have strong leaning in as far as access to social services was concerned.
It was skewed towards security mostly.
Yes, towards national security, in ensuring that it's a tool to ensure the same. And so, of course, over time we've seen that it has evolved, and what we see now, it is more now ingrained within access to social services. And I'll still just give you another context-specific scenario, that even when we were doing research around Uganda, we were keen to ask that question on, so when the system was being rolled out, what were you told was the importance of having a national ID? Many people would either tell you, I was told without the national ID, I would not be able to vote. Others would tell you that the national ID was going to be used if you're going to stand for elections, so you cannot be eligible if you do not have a national ID. Others would just simply tell you, the government said we had to register, so who am I to refuse? So you can see that from the onset, there was a gap in access to information on what the national ID really was. And that in turn, of course, also impacts the level of seriousness with which certain Ugandans took the issue of registration for national ID. You'll have instances where some people did not think, they couldn't have known, for example, the older persons, that there would come a time where national ID is going to be required to verify if you're eligible to receive social assistance
benefits. 25,000.
Yes, exactly. So for such people, when you ask them, first of all, they're frail and old, of poor memory. Them getting through the queues to register for national ID is in itself a toll on them. So when they reach at a certain point and they're being asked to verify their age, for example, some of them will easily give whatever estimate they could come up with, because they do not remember. Yeah, so that was an issue. And of course, even for some of the registration officials, in trying to verify, because then they were looking at the people that come before them.
Yes, Brian.
And so if a certain age is stated and they think it couldn't possibly be that this person is this year old, they will still estimate and say, no, I don't think you're that old. The older person will have nothing to say in turn, because one, they're probably tired after going through this rigorous process, but also they need to get it done with. So most of them went on that way. So maybe just to talk about the evolution, since you've said, just to talk about the journey of the national ID. So it being entrenched in the law, we saw that around 2015, the Registration of Persons Act came into force. And in this act, you'll have because I figure most Ugandans think that the issue of a national ID being needed is something that is grounded in directives by government. No, it's actually grounded in the law.
Indeed.
So the Registration of Persons Act mandates different agencies, institutions of government to ensure that if someone is accessing public services, they must have a national ID. Now, of course, it hasn't been entirely rolled out across board.
Indeed.
But what we've been seeing over time is that it is gradually becoming of major importance. I'll give examples. So in the health sector, for example, now this might be very foreign to most people in the urban areas such as Kampala. It might be foreign because you've accessed public facilities, health facilities, and you've probably never been asked for a national ID. But one thing is clear, if you actually check the registers in those public health facilities, there is a section where they require that you provide your national identification number.
Indeed.
Now, lucky for us over here, and that is for those that are accessing the public health facilities anyway, because I know that many people, again, resort to private health care where they will not ask for it. So what happens in the more rural areas, I'll tell you, been to areas such as Busia, Nebi, and you'll find that health personnel are actually insisting on people presenting the national ID to access health services. So without it, you're going to be left by the wayside. That is what is happening. And just
so that's what you mean when you say the national ID system is exclusionary and discriminatory.
Exactly.
People are being left out.
Exactly. And even for those that in some instances have been able to get the access in those areas without the national ID, you'll find that there is still a difference in treatment, talking about the discrimination again, that at instances you come up, they tell you, health personnel comes and says, those with national IDs, please over to this side. If you do not have, over to the other side. Now, they will attend to those that have national IDs first and then come over to you. That's in instances where they'll actually take it. I know that we were in Kayunga while doing the research, and we actually chanced upon a woman who was pregnant, and she was sent away. And if you read our report on this research, it was titled Chased Away and Left to Die.
Yes, indeed.
Such experiences are the ones that inspired this report, that a woman has come in an emergency situation, she's due to give birth, and then she's being told you cannot access because you don't have a national ID. What did she have to do? Leave, go and look for a national ID, because what she was told was, if you do not have one, then at least bring us your spouses. So she goes, finds a boda man somewhere, convinces him, and then she comes back with that national ID. So this is how it is evolved, and now we've seen it also in access to social benefits for the elderly. And so the story keeps rolling and rolling. I know that as we speak, since we're talking about this evolution, as we speak, General Otafire has come out to say that we're now rolling out a new ID, as you've stated. So after having seen all this over I think 10 years, we're now at a point where the government is saying that we need another ID. What they're fronting is mainly the highlights of this talk is we're having an ID that is modern, more technologically advanced. We're going to be capturing more data, personal data, the biometrics, the DNA, all that is going to be
iris.
taken. Yes. But then one of the questions that remains
Isn't that the solution that you always wanted?
And you see, you see, I think to say the solution isn't exactly in having a more advanced,
more inclusive,
system. No, but that's also saying we should not equate being more technologically advanced to being more inclusive, because I think they're two different things.
And I think I do understand you. Benard Mujuni is the Commissioner of Equity and Rights at the Ministry of Gender and Labour and Social Development. He's saying it is one thing to introduce such great technological advancements.
Absolutely.
And it's another to ensure that even with the normal national ID that we have, only 70% could be able to access the national ID system. Meaning it's not really about the national ID, but putting in place other alternative sources of identifying Ugandans.
Premier,
before they access these services.
Thank you so much, Premier, for the opportunity to interface.
Indeed, Benard.
And I think there is much more to talk about, regarding, identity in this country.
Indeed.
You see, you must look at the issue of security broadly. When they say security, it's not about the gun security, the insecurity, of the war. No, even poverty is insecurity.
I see.
You know, livelihood, threat, risks, social protection, lack of social security is insecurity. And to me, I look at it broadly. And the moment we get it right there, then we know that, you know, the mind of the government or the people behind this program was to holistically ensure that people get social security. And of course, even financial, accessing, you know, bank accounts and all that is security. You know, economic security, livelihood, and so many things. And so, to me, that's a departure point. I do not think that when the government was introducing ID, I looked at it in terms of the security and voting and all that. No, I looked at it in terms of holistic social protection, security.
But up to now, we are talking about only 70% coverage, meaning we still have so many Ugandans who are being excluded.
It has been a learning curve. It has been, you know, the processes we went through, which is, thank you so much, Brian, you detailed them very, very well. But this has been a learning experience.
Indeed.
For NILA, for everyone, for internal affairs, for everyone in this process. For us as Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, because we are the biggest data miners for NILA because of the SAGE program. And you know, this has been a game changer in terms of livelihoods of older persons.
Indeed.
And now, if anything, we are also respondents to the same petition which they have put.
Indeed.
And I can assure you that yes, there are some avenues where you find that, you know, like they require the fingerprints of the person, but the fingerprints, the elderly person or people with disabilities, actually one doesn't have any fingers at all. So how would you do that? Identify, that person, include them. So there has been some remedial action which NILA is undertaking. They have learned from all these, you know, experiences. And I can assure you that the new system is robust, it is inclusive, it has adopted the challenges which different stakeholders have. Because for ourselves, we raised some concerns. Yeah.
The biggest challenge from the Initiative for Socio and Economic Rights, and Unwanted Witness, and many other civil society organizations is that the national ID is very exclusionary and discriminatory. We should find alternative sources of identification. Is it possible moving forward for me to use a work ID? I go to a bank and access a loan. When we're in the health center, they need a national ID. Can I front my village ID? Can I get a socio service in that regard?
You see, we are moving towards a social care economy.
Indeed.
You know, we are looking at the middle income status. What does that mean? In the trickle-down effects, you must invest back in the people. So how do you identify? By getting multiple documents to identify. Even if you said, okay, everyone should move with a passport, that would be very hard and difficult. And then there's interpolability of so many other things at the regional level. How do you link up with Kenya? How do you link up with Tanzania? Even when it comes to travel, you know, besides this passport, you can use your ID to move. So it's very important for each and every Ugandan to have an identity card. And he talked about Busia.
Yes.
And you know, the challenge with Busia is about border. People across utilizing our services here. And there has been some mechanism of control, identifying the person. And we're saying, yes, it should be a universal human right to own and have an identity card. Now, we can talk. I wish he was talking even about the cost of getting the ID as being prohibitive or something like that. But that would be very, very, very important for me, because I know there are some people who will not probably manage to get that much money. And you cannot blame them for not having the money. They need the identity. So what do we do to make sure that each and everybody gets an identity card?
Prohibitive costs, Mr. Benard. I'm looking at a farmer in Chazanga right now who just needs to renew his ID, and Nira is saying we need 200,000 from you. Where is this peasant going to get that money? Isn't it the exclusion we are talking about and the discrimination?
No.
We've not put in account that some Ugandans can't even cough 50,000. It was hard for them when the price was at 50.
Remember, I'm not supposed to get blows not meant for me. They're supposed to be NILA. But affordability is another question.
Let him finish.
Affordability is another question in terms of, for example, now they are registering students, and some teachers and some schools have imposed the fee, illegal fee, and I've seen it going over. NILA has come out to say there is no one supposed to pay for identity card at school registration. But some paid 10K, others 20,000, others. And these are, call them non-formal barriers. There are many. There are corrupt agents. There are people whose attitude is to manipulate the system. And this is all alongside the value chain of giving an identity card. But we must confront them. And that's what we want the civil society and other sectors to help us.
And that's why we're here, you know, dissecting this conversation to ensure that the powers that be who are watching get to understand that irrespective of the fact that if with the national ID you can access social security protection, health services and so forth, it's not a luxury enjoyed by all Ugandans. Some do not have these national IDs. So in tandem, if they don't, what can be done? If actually you say you're proposing a new wave of national IDs and you put a cap of 200,000, how many of our Ugandans can actually afford an express ticket of our national ID within 2 days? So does that mean we are now paying for a free service? You do know what I mean. Government is securing 600 billion for this mass registration exercise. That is your money, taxpayers' money. Now you're being charged for the same service that is supposed to be free. That is another injustice that we are talking about. Am I right, Alex Brand, Kiira?
And I just wanted to follow it up from you know, where Benard is coming from before I even get to the issue of the cost, because one of the things that have been going on, and again Benard brings up something, another sphere within which we've seen the national ID system having a role.
Yes,
and
Mr.
that is the education sector. When he talked about the registration that has been happening, we all know, and we were recently still out in the field, at about the time when the government was saying that now all learners have to be registered.
Indeed.
Now, when that was happening, one of the things that was required was to say that each learner, the parents, actually have to provide their NIN details. Now, one of the things we found, and the queries were not just coming from the parents per se, but also the people that are manning these education institutions.
Indeed.
So teachers and headmasters would tell you, we are finding a challenge. The government has rolled out this program to register learners. The challenge is that some of the parents are not returning these forms, because then when they get to the point of inputting their NIN details, they do not have a national ID. Of course, they're not being compelled to return the forms, but then what happens is the justification for government to have this registration done is to plan better for the learners. Now, if there is a parent who has not remitted that form, what then happens is that government is going to get the wrong picture.
Indeed.
They're going to budget for, let's say, 100 learners in school A, when in fact you have over 100 learners. What is that going to have in the long run? You're going to find that because fewer monies have been sent, that means, and that is where issues of the what Benard is calling the informal costs start coming in, because then now schools have to devise means of ensuring that they meet certain costs, because government did not you know, send over monies that are enough for each and every learner. And the very issue around the payments that were being made around this registration, head teachers were telling us we had to put up a certain fee, because as you can see, we cannot be photocopying these forms for the parents for free. So that is what was happening. Of course, even the costs that were being attached, some of them were ridiculous, because we all know how much photocopying is, really.
Yes,
but you'd find that they're saying pay 2,000, pay 10,000. So that gives it, there is room for such to happen when we're not doing things the right way. But also to hint on the issue of the importance of the national ID. We really want to be clear that we're not discounting the importance of having a national ID. Yeah? What we are saying is we need to have it done the right way before we impress it upon everyone, or press it upon everyone, that you have to have it to access healthcare, to have you have to have it to access social benefits. In the meantime, let us devise means of seeing that people, everyone accesses these services or rights. Let NIRA clean up its act. Yeah? Make sure that the coverage for the national ID is improved before you say, hey, by the way, for you to access this, we need you to have ABC. So that is what we're saying. And also the other issue is along the border districts, as Benard was saying, you know, putting it more like a sieve to ensure that only Ugandans are accessing services. We found those stories still. from health personnel in health facilities.
That's what we want to hear.
Telling you we were required to do so. That we're required to do so because very many people are moving in from Kenya, from Congo to access our services.
And we have and remember, Uganda has 1.3 million refugees.
Bernard, one of the other things that we need to know is that you see, it was said that these are some of the things the national ID came to cure. We are yet to see an analysis that shows that from the time we had the national ID in place, for example, one of the issues we've had in health facilities has been largely drug stock outs.
Indeed.
Now, it could be said that the drugs were being consumed by a population bigger than what the government had calculated for, because, well, we have foreigners coming in to consume these drugs.
So you're saying if government uses the national ID numbers as a yardstick to plan for these individuals, we would end up in a problem because they wouldn't have the right data.
But you see, up until now, we actually still have the issue of drug stock outs being persistent. So what exactly has changed? What change has the national ID?
So you're saying in a village like Chazanga, you do have 1,000 people, 500 have national ID. So you're saying government will plan for only the 500, not knowing that there are other citizens. So if this medicine comes to the health center,
I think
all the 1,000 are going to pounce on these resources and there won't be enough.
The intention, the broader aspect of this national ID program is to make sure that everyone has and no one misses out. And this is in line with SDG goals. Leave no one behind. And you cannot be planning for PDM, for example, Polish Development Model, and you say you leave any other group outside the delivery channel. So the national ID becomes very, very, very important in so many other ways. Economic, social, cultural, identity, belonging, travel, make it crime control, everything. And we've seen people manipulating some of this system. Recently, they raided some of the people in wherever and found someone with over...
Around the end of August.
Yes, over 2,000 IDs, and that caused the national uproar. So where does someone get all these IDs? And that should tell you there's a big component, of course, of security, of a person. Holistic security is my word. And to me, I think the more we talk about how best we can ease the conditions for accessing the ID, the better.
How will the new proposed national ID, Benard, help alleviate some of the challenges that bogged the old national ID as we enter the renewal and, the renewal and the registration phase?
I think that is largely supposed to be answered by NILA. But I can say from what we have seen, for example, for us as the social development sector, they have addressed all our issues of concern. First of all, people who are 80 plus on SAGE program, aging is moving towards total disability, of course, finally expiring. So as you move, even parts of your body start being dysfunctional. You'll find 3 fingers are not functional, and that's it. But remember, they took it as a fingerprint. And so we raised some of these concerns in a detailed research, and they have addressed them in the new ID system. So for us, it's going to be, and as such, the new system is going to bring 45,000 older persons on the SAGE program. It's a plus for us. 45,000 people will join the new social assistance grants for empowerment program.
So those who do not have the national ID, and you've known what is surrounding the proposal surrounding the new national ID, that if you need it in 2 days, you need to part with 200,000 Ugandan shillings. So we are talking about elderly individuals in this case. How many are going to be able to get this money to actually get this national ID so that they can enjoy the services that you are talking about?
Affordability,
do they have to wait?
As in how to afford, or whether it will be a waiver, that is not my question really to answer.
But don't you see a problem there?
The cost benefit
leading to exclusion.
For us, from our estimate, is that it is going to be more inclusive than exclusive. And to me, that is the argument I'm taking. Whether you will not afford, because some of these people, by the way, who are on SAGE programs, they have a lot of social support around them.
We're talking about that someone who is eligible now but can't access it.
And social support comes in so many other ways. I'm sure you extend support to some of the elderly persons in the village. You can afford to sponsor. And this is the African social protection system, which is equivalent even to the earlier norms and ways of having a granary by your household. and you couldn't starve when the neighbor had food. So we know that there's a lot of support that comes in when it comes to accessing services, when it comes to healthcare, when an older person or and a senior citizen breaks down. It's you to take care of them, isn't it? Brian, you do. I do. We take care of our older persons. And I know that we take care beyond just financial support, but also, you know, livelihood, health, and all that. So, and I think affordability is a question which I'm sure Nila is in a position to answer.
Brian, Kiira, I'm looking at an elderly person around 2020, around June, when you authored that report, when you started actually investigating these issues. If that person didn't have a national ID then, they couldn't access SAGE, they couldn't access health services. 2021, they couldn't do the same. 2022, here we are, they are still grappling. And then government says, no, you have a chance to go and actually get a national ID, but 200,000 needs to be coughed from your pocket. Don't you see that this is going to lead to more exclusion the more that we front this national ID and its effectiveness?
So what
we need proposals on how best to leverage that.
So what happens is, and I very much appreciate some of the takes that are coming through in this conversation. But for example, and again, I try to draw back to the lived experiences that we've interfaced with of these people.
Yes,
you'll find that it's true, it's very easy to think that people down there are really benefiting from the African social protection kind of system that we as Africans, as Ugandans, we have this whole thing going that, you know, we look after the elderly, those that are vulnerable. But that is a very small percentage, by the way. Very few people are doing that, I can assure you. And even those that are in a position to do so, very many have abandoned the elderly and actually having nothing to live by. So much such that the 25,000 means a whole great deal to them if they could only get it. But to talk about the issue of affordability, I think what is happening, and I'll start it from the 50,000, I think the discussion, and maybe us discussing this way also points to one thing, you know, always ensuring that access to information is something that is fronted by government. Like government has to be proactive in ensuring access to information. But as we speak, what we have largely gone by as Ugandans is what Honorable Tafire came and said is going to happen going forward at a press conference. Now, the intricacies of how that is going to be structured and rolled out, we actually do not know. What usually happens in our country is that something will be rolled out, and then when Ugandans start making noise about it, then government will come out to tell you, oh, by the way, here is how we planned it. It shouldn't work that way. We should ensure participation as the process goes.
Bottom to up approach.
To know that as you're planning something, do Ugandans know why you are planning it? Do they have an idea what exactly you're trying to cure and how are you curing it? We need to know that. But as it is, we do not have comprehensive communication on how this is going to be rolled out. Maybe in the ministries and the agencies, they could be knowing. The public generally does not have an idea. So about the issue of cost, again, 50,000, and maybe just to say that in my recollection, what the General Tafire was saying was that there will be 50,000 paid for those that want an express
in
service.
2 days.
Yes. And then if you happen, the proposal around the 200,000 has been that if you happen to lose your national ID,
or if you want to change a particular on your national ID,
with 200,000.
So
and I know that one of the things that he said was exactly, so he's bringing it in a way of saying it should be punitive to make sure that people then
keep their
take
IDs
much
safe.
more care about their national IDs. But you see, even if someone was negligent about how they have kept their national ID, let's say they were reckless indeed and they lost the national ID. Now, would you rather that such a person went to a health facility in need of emergency care and they're told, sorry, you do not have a national ID, kindly step back.
Indeed.
Because you did not, or you were not able to pay the 200,000 shillings.
Indeed.
I would understand if this money or if the national ID was not so entrenched in access to social services as it is.
Indeed.
I would understand that. But for you to know that people actually direly need these services, then you tag the national ID to it, but further then tag more costs to it. That is problematic.
Indeed.
People think that 50,000 is change. Good for the privileged ones.
Indeed.
We've been out there and we've done research. For example, I'll give you context. Research that is not even connected to let's say what we're talking about. Let's say access to healthcare, where I don't know if you've ever heard of a scheme in Uganda called the voucher program. At a certain point it was going around now. That voucher program was being funded by the World Bank. What happened is they were trying to enhance access to reproductive health services. What they did was to say that to enable, to foster this, foster this, let's have mothers buy this card at only 4,000 shillings for them to access the range of reproductive health services for they give birth.
To deliver from the self-space hospital.
My goodness. 4,000 Ugandan shillings, just a little up over $1. There are people that are not able to afford that 4,000.
So I don't know.
And yet in comparison to the benefits that are attending, you'd say that they're enormous. But people are not able. So how then do you
is Brian saying that all this should be for free?
To cope with 50,000.
What Brian is saying is that these are taxpayers and they should enjoy a free public service. Why do they have to cover?
No, Remy.
Mujuni, go ahead.
Remy, look, you know, for you to create a responsive population, society that is conscious, that is nationalist, that is contributing to country's development, you need to contribute something. We have done our market.
We contribute by paying taxes.
Exactly.
And
these contributions are being made.
No. For example, you cannot afford you cannot afford to give free healthcare services. That's a very unbearable cost. Just I can give you an example that just by reducing the age from 80 to 70 for such beneficiaries, it more than doubles the cost of the program. You can't afford. These are social economic rights are realized progressively. It's not a one-time thing. You can't, they are almost unaffordable. Now, when you contribute towards an identity card, it's valuable to you. Actually, I've read books by Brian Tracy and one of the international motivational speakers, the father of motivational speakers, and he says, even a beggar, by paying a tax, he feels more, responsible to the country.
We hear you, Benard, but we are looking at a Ugandan who has been involved in an accident. Robberies have taken place during that incident.
Involved in an accident, and you have
someone breaks into my house, steals the national ID.
But you have a fallback. You have your NIN number. All you need to sort out at the hospital is to take your NIN number. Or whatever shows that you actually registered. And so you need to prove that. Now, those are the modalities that we should be talking about. Know that if you don't have a physical ID, therefore you can't access the service. But I have, except it got issues.
Is it possible to have a conversation around alternative sources of identification? If that have come through.
No. I want to give you an example of traffic.
But I do have a village ID.
I want to give you an example of traffic fines. Every other time you're supposed to drive responsibly, comply with traffic laws. And they give you a traffic fine. You keep it, 1, 2, 3. I have a friend who had raised around 15. Now, it so happened that they all came at the time when school fees was on their neck.
I see.
And I mean, it's an accident waiting to happen. You keep letting it happen. And to me, I think we need to promote responsible citizenship.
Indeed.
And that comes from the inclusive society. If you want to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, everyone must contribute. And I mean, 50,000, we know how much it is to an elderly person who does it. That's why we give a grant of 25,000. We know they don't have them, but we know that getting that document makes them feel how they feel. I can't even explain to you. So, and we haven't had any issues with people failing to get a document at 50,000, for example, identity card. No.
Because they won't show up, because they don't even have that money.
No,
you won't even
we
hear
are
about the
in their
problems.
community.
Still the
Romeo,
context is
Romeo.
that, for
Let us
example,
finish it a few seconds.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Benard.
It's like
okay.
you are saying that the government doesn't know what is happening to the people on the ground. No, we are so much in sync. We know what the pulse and the beat, the heartbeat of the community.
You believe that the same government that knows 30% of Ugandans do not have access to national IDs and they make it a prerequisite to access Social Security, you believe they don't know?
You see, I'm not so sure. None of you paid graduated tax, isn't it? I paid graduated tax. You know what it meant?
Go ahead.
Graduated tax was one of the most interesting things, because everyone knew that there had to be a tax be paid, had to find something to do.
Indeed.
It was popular and unpopular, and,
Yes.
and they don't want to discuss the political part of graduated
Indeed,
tax.
let's not go
but
there.
being universal in nature made people go and find work. And to me, I liked it. I saw my brothers running to the bush, but again looking for what to do in order to go and pay the tax. I said, oh, this is very interesting. So I think we need to promote responsible citizenship, even ISA, even other civil society. When you are pushing for some of these policy changes, give alternative views. How do you want it to be done? Do you want it as a grant? We are already granting cash transfers, and we are looking at even increasing. And so we want to have a middle line, because some of these economic and progressive rights, you cannot achieve them overnight.
Alternative mechanisms of identification. It seems like, according to his submission, Benard Mujuni, he says there might never be an alternative mechanism of identifying Ugandans other than the national ID.
It's a regional platform.
What is the take of ISA? in
Our
this case?
identity.
It really honestly can't be
It's
that.
time now. Go ahead.
And if it were, that would entirely be absurd. So
Which is the case now.
yes, it's entirely absurd. I want the government that is actually in sync with the needs of the people to be able to respond to what Romeo, you actually also raised.
Indeed.
In saying what happens then to the 30%, for example, of those that do not have the national ID. If the government is so in sync with the needs of those people, then that means we wouldn't have this situation. We wouldn't. They would look for other forms of ensuring that everyone is catered for. Now, that notwithstanding, before you even talk about the 30%, I'll have you know that even amongst the 70%, that those who are being oppressed, how? The accuracy of the data that we have.
Indeed.
So what we have at our hands, and I'll agree with Benard to that extent, that it's not just about the card. It's about the system, the national ID system. I'll give an example, and having it in line with the Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment Program. There are older persons that are over 80 years and above.
Indeed.
It's clear on their national IDs that that is the case, but yet they're not receiving those benefits. On the other hand,
You can't force someone.
not that they've chosen not to go. They're actually not on the beneficiary register.
Finish it.
Okay.
Yes. I want to hear how this goes.
Yeah, they're not on the beneficiary register.
Yes.
And on the other hand, you have people that have long died, passed on, older persons, that are still on the register.
On the register.
And that money is being remitted somehow. Now, how do you harmonize the two? So just to say that the issue we have is much larger than the physical ID, but rather the system as a whole. There's something that you said about the alternatives. And this is what we've been saying.
Indeed.
Before the national ID system was in place, we had forms of identification. We are not saying do away.
Let's remind them of those forms of identification.
Yes, forms of identification.
They seem to have forgotten them.
Such as LC1,
Graduated tax.
LC1 that was being given out, voters cards, those were being used. Some, of course, had passports up until now. Passports are still being used.
Work
Driver's
IDs.
licenses, work IDs, those were being used. We are saying it's okay to have the national ID in place. But for as long as it is excluding other people, for as long as it is still flawed, allow for those that are being disadvantaged by its flaws to use the alternative forms of identification. And still, I'll give a context-specific example.
I'll
I
come
think
in
Benard
quickly
also can agree. Just the last one before. when some of these social assistance benefits programs were being started, I know, for example, for a fact that they were not big on tagging it to the national ID. There was a time when the older persons, to get their benefits, what was happening was verification from the community level.
Peer targeting.
Yes, and it was actually working. It was working. That the people at LC level would say, we have LC1 sub-county chief, the chairman of the older persons, for example, I'm giving an example, say that, oh, so we have such and such an older persons on this village, rather.
Indeed.
Do you, can you verify that at this year old? And that would be, that this year old, so they can benefit from this benefit. Now, the other thing is the issue of progressive realization. I know that Benard has talked about it. When this, for example, the SAGE program was being rolled out, one of the things was, it started out at about the age of 60 and 65 for Karamoja region to be eligible, and then it changed to 80. Now, that shift in and of itself is retrogressive. What you have done is to make sure that if there is an older person that was anticipating that in about, let's say they were 60, Karamoja region, for example, that's 60, and they know I have 5 years to be eligible for this benefit, then the government comes up and says, oh, sorry, you'll have to wait much longer for over 15 or so years.
Exclusion.
Now, such a person,
I think
in most cases...
Let's not be diversionary, right?
Let him first finish his statement. I would like you to finish that.
Yeah, so what is happening is you're now putting more people out of the bracket of benefiting by putting it at 80 years. And also, I want us to have programs that are very realistic and alive to the facts. What is the life expectancy in Uganda?
Indeed. If it is 65 and we are putting it at the age of 80, yes.
So what who exactly are you planning for? By
first of all,
who are those people that you very much want
first
to
of all,
Benard, you can exhaust that analogy, then we talk about the issue of privacy.
You see,
privacy is also
the most important thing His Excellency the President has done, or Uganda has done, because we've seen it when he's been the leader, is to bring in something called affirmative action. And affirmative action has, even what we are talking about is affirmative action. Particular measures to redress the socio-economic imbalances caused by our structural and institutional discrimination.
Indeed.
And this is what we can't tackle it 100% overnight. But we are making
you acknowledge
progress.
there is a problem.
Yes,
Indeed.
there's a problem. There's structural discrimination, there's structural exclusion from intended and unintended. And it has both intended and unintended consequences.
Indeed.
Now, we are saying, of course, and in instances like SAGE for Karamoja, there is affirmative action. We lowered the age to make sure that we become more inclusive. That is one. Two, if you really...
What he's saying, his argument was, if you had actually conferred with the people at the bottom, you wouldn't have to come up with this recommendation later on.
No. It's about affordability, and he knows. No, it's about affordability. By just lowering the age nationally, because first of all, we're not in the whole of this country, but now SAGE is in each and every district of this country, and you know the birth rate of the district is more than what probably you can.
I do have
the
5 minutes left. Benard Mujuni, there is a conversation on the right to privacy. I want to hear your thoughts on that, especially on the new national ID. They'll install a chip in the ID that recognizes my eyes, captures the DNA in there. So you do have people who are concerned, especially civil society organizations who are saying it will be used to surveil Ugandans.
We've been talking about...
Are you worried about that?
No, I'm not. I'm actually excited. Why? Because
it infringes on
everywhere you go, go to UK, go to London, go to everywhere, there is an identification system for them to take stock of their numbers. And without a country that doesn't know how many people are anywhere is not in charge.
In tandem, civil society is saying the new national ID, just like the old one, is skewed towards security.
There is an analogy.
Social protection.
There is an analogy I always give
to public service.
There's an analogy I give between a snake and a wasp. They agreed to become friends, and they opened each other's mouth like this to look into to see how open. But then they actually in the middle there was a crisis, and they went for water at the oasis. In the middle of the journey, the snake collapsed. And the wasp called its cousins and to come and enjoy the meat until when the snake woke up and found it was going to be slaughtered and said, "My friend, I thought you were my friend." Then they recalled how they opened each was when they opened the mouth. And the snake remembered that when it looked into the mouth of the wasp, there was darkness because of the small waist. So there was mistrust. Somehow it couldn't understand. So I think the civil society must learn how to trust and work properly with the government. It's about building systems that can sustain the livelihood of the people. It's not that everything is about to control, to target you, to no. Look at, and he has said it that initially it was about security, which was, how do you call it, armed or military, security for the, to control where you Al-Shabaab or what. No, it was about livelihood security. It's about social protection. It's about services. It's about planning and programming. It's about budgeting. It's about equity and resource appropriation. To know who is where, who is the elderly, who is young, who is the person with disability. For example, we have 26% of this country. People living with disability. Between me and you, we have a disability, isn't it? And that's a lot of people.
There is Benard Mujuni, the Commissioner of Rights and Equity at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. In the dying minutes, I'd like to give Mr. Brian Kiira YB a chance to actually communicate to the populace that is watching NTV right now. Talk to the people on recommendations moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, ours has really been around ensuring that we have systems in place.
Indeed.
That work and they respond to the needs of the people. We are keen about the 30%, for example. If you say that this number do not have a national ID, we want to probe into what are the implications of that person not having a national ID within this context.
Even among the 70%, how many have to renew? 70%. How many lost? How many have wrong details and they have to change them? So they are affected.
All those
Probably
dynamics.
Talk about renewal period. Give it a longer renewal period.
All those
not
dynamics
only a young.
come into play. And what we are saying is, if we are alive to those dynamics, then we need to do something that serves the people. So if it is that because of a certain error X, whether by the applicant for the national ID or by the government, we need to know that we put in place alternatives. Let those alternatives be there. One thing that I've noted in the discussions that we've had with government on and on is the fact that they have not downplayed the inadequacies. At least for NIRA, in the interactions that we've had. They've been candid enough to say we've not covered the entire country. We know that these are the attendant problems.
That is Ms. Chisholm ED, she's watching.
In trying, as
she
civil
acknowledges
society,
the problems.
as civil society, we are trying to make sure that we work with the government. How is it that we are working with them? When we go out to the field to carry out such researches as we've talked about and come back with these findings and present them to you. Our hope, ideally, is that you will see some water in them and say, okay, the recommendations you gave are ABC, let's work around them. But unfortunately,
but the recommendations cannot undermine the exercise.
We meet, no recourse. You go and you're told, can you at least entertain the thought of seeing
and in the next 50 seconds, the viewer who is watching would like to hear your last submission on the right to privacy.
Would you entertain the alternatives? Let people use other forms of identifications. And then when you meet an answer such as, that is impossible, what then do you have to do?
The new national ID will capture DNA. Are you worried that it infringes on Article 27, right to privacy? The
details of, and I've seen that even in more advanced countries, by the way, privacy is still an issue. And they too haven't yet even gotten a hold of it. I worry for Uganda. I really worry. We've all stated that there have been instances, for example, where random people have been found with masses of national IDs. We've seen certain third parties using data, service providers using data that you'd think would be in the custody of the government. And so I think government really needs to be keen on the issue of privacy. If they're going ahead with it, they need to also focus on it. But most importantly, ensuring access to social services.
Alex Brian YB, he is the program officer at the Initiative for Socio and Economic Rights. He's not alone in studio. We also did interact with Benard Mujuni, Commissioner Equity and Rights in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Socio Development. There is a new phase of registration coming your way. Government has given itself at least 1 year for those who need an express national ID. 200,000 if you did lose one and you want to renew. If you have a wrong a mistake on particular that was mistaken on your national ID, and if it's on the part of NIRA, they'll cough the money. But if it's on your part and you give them the wrong details, you have to cough that 200,000. If you're a first-time register, 50,000 only in that regard. But for those who are willing to go with the normal delayed system that takes ages, it's going to be free of charge. That is according to the Ministry